Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. We do have some friends and blessed community members joining us, so we'll continue to admit folks from the waiting room. We have quite a few people registered for the event, so we anticipate having some friends joining us a little bit later. But we would like to begin. Um, I'm so honored and delighted to be here helping to host this very special gathering and this very special kickoff to a weekend of engagement. My name is Vineeth Chander, and I'm honored to serve as the director of the Hindu Life program at Princeton University, and also as a member of the Sacred Ecology Forum. Tonight's event, as I said, kicks off the Eco Bhakti weekend, which is a special collaboration between the Princeton University Hindu Life program, which is part of our Office of Religious Life, the Sacred Ecology Forum, and the Bhakti Center in New York City. I'm so grateful to all of our partners and all of the folks behind the scenes who have helped to come together and to make this weekend of events possible. And you'll hear a little bit more about the other events in the series. But today's conversation will kick us off. And I'd like to now call upon Allegra Lovejoy Whiprud, one of my dearest friends, colleagues, and fellow Sacred Ecology Forum team member, to introduce the talk this evening and to let us know a little bit more about our special guest speakers. Allegra is an alumna of Princeton, part of the class of 2014, and she was an active part of the Hindu Life program and the Princeton Hindu Satsangam student group when she was here. In fact, as a first-year student, she is really the person who spearheaded and coordinated a very popular and historic event known as East Meets West. Some of you on the call may be familiar with it, or maybe you've seen the video. Allegra was instrumental in bringing that event to fruition and in holding that space and hosting that event. And that event, of course, brought together in dialogue the esteemed Dr. Cornel West and Radhanath Swami, who is one of our speakers tonight. Allegra is now pursuing graduate study at Yale Divinity School, and her scholarship examines the intersections of ecology, theology, and pastoral care. So I'm delighted to now call on Allegra to introduce us to the framework of our conversation this evening and to introduce our very special guest speakers.
Thank you, Vineeth. That was too generous. I am happy to offer another welcome to Radhanath Swami Maharaj and to Gopal Patel and to all our guests here on behalf of the Sacred Ecology Forum and the Bhakti Center, additional organizers of this weekend's programs. In addition to the special talk this evening with Maharaj and Gopal, this Eco Bhakti weekend features a program tomorrow by Runshore Prime and one on Sunday by John V. Harrison. You can find out more and sign up if you want in the link that's here in the chat. What is Eco Bhakti and why now? Eco Bhakti is a spiritual orientation acknowledging that service to the divine includes service to earth. It means caring for other people and the earth as the beloved creation of God. During this particular time, when the violence of racism and capitalism and so many other causes are practically at an all-time high, Eco Bhakti might even be understood as an act of resistance. Just today, a 170,000 acre wildfire is burning part of Rocky Mountain National Forest in Colorado. Record-breaking flooding in Vietnam has killed 114 people this month alone. 30% of Bangladesh's landmass was underwater last month due to record-breaking typhoons, washing away homes and livelihoods and killing 54 people. Severe drought in Eastern Africa has left 3 entire countries on the edge of a declaration of famine. What does Bhakti mean in a time like this? Bhakti invites us into a loving relationship with the divine that transforms our lives, turning us into instruments of divine compassion in the world. Eco Bhakti invites us to pay special attention to the earth and vulnerable people. During this time of climate crisis and social crisis, Eco Bhakti might offer a pathway to reshaping our society for the better. And I'm very excited to hear what Radhanath Swami Maharaj and Gopal Patel have to share with us tonight about different ways of understanding Bhakti and Eco Bhakti and what it might mean at this point in time. Turning to introduce Maharaj, Radhanath Swami Maharaj has been a monk in Hinduism's Krishna Bhakti tradition for nearly 50 years, dedicating his life to helping people find meaning while leading social initiatives which feed, house, and heal millions of those in need. Rooted in his study of the Bhakti tradition and the teachings of Swami Prabhupada, his guru, Maharaj's message is as profound as it is simple. By cultivating a rich inner life of self-awareness and a genuine practice of loving service, we can become instruments of compassion and agents of sustainable change in the world. Maharaj is the founder and coordinator of multiple spiritual communities throughout the world, the most prominent of which is the Radha Gopinath Ashram located in Mumbai, India. Under his inspiration and guidance, the project has grown to include hospitals, orphanages, eco-friendly farms, schools, and a food distribution program that feeds more than 1 million children in India every single day. Particularly relevant to our talk this evening, he is the inspiration behind the Govardhan Eco Village, an intentional community outside Mumbai. The Eco Village has received awards for initiatives ranging from ecotourism and rural development to green architecture and water systems design. And I highly recommend each one of you visit if you ever get the chance. Gopal, our second speaker, is co-founder and director of Global, a nonprofit organization that works to educate and mobilize Hindu communities globally for environmental action. He has been an environmental activist, campaigner, and consultant for over 10 years, working in India, East Africa, Europe, and North America. A recognized global leader in the religious environmental movement, he has been honored for his work by Prince Philip at Buckingham Palace, spoken at the White House, and currently serves as an advisor on religion and sustainable development to the United Nations. Born and raised in England, he currently lives with his wife in New York City. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Gopal and Radhanath Swami Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Allegra, for that very kind introduction. Welcome to all of you, and of course, welcome to His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj for joining us. We're looking forward to a very rich and robust conversation here today about Eco Bhakti and its application in this moment of ecological crisis, but also a moment of opportunity and transformation for many of us. And can I just say, I love the fact that we have someone watching who is milking cows as they're listening to this talk. I just feel like that's so on point for the session today. So thank you to those farmers there. We're going to, Radhanath Swami and I will speak and have a conversation for about somewhere between 40 to 45 minutes. And then we'll have time for question and answer. So if you would like to, if you do have any questions, and I'm sure you will, please, I believe, put them in the chat box or use the Q&A function, whichever one we have operating to submit your questions, and we'll get round to those later on. Radhanath Swami, it's such an honor to be with you. The last time I saw you was at the Govardhan Eco Village back in February, but much right before the pandemic started, and we were all forced to lock ourselves in. And in preparation for this talk, I was recently reading your book, The Journey Within, and in there you give a beautiful framework for Eco Bhakti. You say that Eco Bhakti is about active, intelligent, directed compassion. I love that framing, that it's active, it's intelligent, and it's directed compassion. And so those are the topics that I want to discuss with you and really hear more from you about today. So I want to start the conversation focused on action. And as Allegra just spoke about, we currently live in what is considered a moment of planetary crisis, where we are seeing the negative impact of a number of separate but interconnected environmental issues. For example, we're still seeing global temperatures continue to rise. We know that we are off track to meet the Paris Climate Agreement from 2015. And if the current trends continue with global warming, that by the end of this century, temperatures would have risen by about 3 to 4 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but any percentage of an increase, even just half a degree increase, means significant change to the ecosystems of the world. And so if we stay on the current track, we know that millions of people globally by the end of this century will be displaced through migration, through stress placed on water, on agriculture, and it will lead to mass starvation and famine. That's just one issue of climate change. A connected and interconnected issue is that of biodiversity loss. A recent report from the World Wildlife Fund shows that in the last 50 years alone, we have lost 2/3 of global wildlife. In 50 years, 2/3 of global wildlife has been lost. And that's mainly due to human activity, destroying habitats, cutting down forests, and overexploiting species, where now we are literally killing the planet on which we live. And so in the face of these challenges, it can be really overwhelming to know where to start our environmental activism, because the issues are so overwhelmingly huge and large and complex, and we are just small people trying to do our daily work. But like you, Radhanath Swami, there are many leaders who are increasingly vocal about the need to care for Mother Earth and are developing world-class projects to showcase environmental care in practice. And your Govardhan Eco Village is one of those models, which is really giving hope for us in these troubling times. So I really would like to start by learning more about the Govardhan Eco Village and the work that's done there, and your vision and your inspiration for that. But I would certainly like to hear, and I'm sure our viewers would as well, is what started you on this path of being an environmental activist? Because it isn't a common path that a sannyasi monk in the renounced order takes. So we'd love to hear how you actually started taking this issue seriously.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyate Shatarine. Bansha Kalpatarubhyas Chakripa Sindhubhya Eva Chapatitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. I am sincerely grateful, honored, and very happy to be with all of you today. Thank you, Vineet and Gopal, Leela and Allegra, and Christopher, Krishna Kishore, for so wonderfully bringing us all together. It was one or two people who had an idea for this conference today, and because they believed in what could be accomplished through this conference today, they energized each other and brought many hundreds of us together. And really, that's the way all great things begin, with individual people who seem to be confronted by insurmountable and impossible situations, but they believe in an idea and inspire one another, and gradually that circle of inspiration expands, it grows. In my own life, my beloved teacher, my guru, Srila Prabhupada, he left Vrindavan, a holy place in India, all alone. He didn't have anything. He had no resources, but he believed in an idea, an idea that he had heard from his guru, that there is a great need for a spiritual revival that's beyond sectarian boundaries within this world. And because one person had the power to inspire others, all those people he inspired became inspirers. And whether it's nationalistic or political or religious or educational, academic, in every sphere of life, individuals have ideas and inspire one another, and small groups become larger groups. I remember Srila Prabhupada would tell us, he would say, I'm just one person who came from India, and look what one person could do. And he was saying that not in an exclusive way to show how he was great, but he was saying that to give us confidence that each and every one of us could actually make a wonderful difference in this world. So, Srila Prabhupada and all the truly great spiritual leaders throughout history, they taught that respect and gratitude to God or to our spiritual origin is inseparable from respect and gratitude to the energy of God's creation. Environmentalism, ecological, sustainable ideas and lifestyle are really inseparable from humane and spiritual ideology. If we really want to live with compassion in the center of our life, whether it's compassion to humanity or animal rights or compassion for our own families, understanding the necessity of living in harmony with the environment, with the ecology, is necessary. Because we are all 100% completely depending on Mother Nature's gifts. In one sense, we call nature Mother Nature because whoever we are, however old we are, whatever we may know or have, we're all like helpless little babies in the arms of Mother Nature, completely dependent on her gifts. The air we breathe, the water, the food, the heat, everything. So to reciprocate with a grateful heart with the gifts of Mother Nature is not only an essential spiritual principle that can be found at the heart of all great religions and spiritual paths, but it's also inseparable from actual humanitarian living. Because everything is connected. In my own life, I learned from the holy books and from holy people that the greatest wealth is the opportunity to serve, to love God within and to serve with compassion. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Sarva Loka Maheshwaram that all of existence, all of creation is the property of God, entrusted to each and every one of us. And to live as responsible caretakers of that sacred property is at the heart of spirituality. It's inseparable. To love God with all your heart, mind, and soul is the first commandment. To love your neighbor as yourself. And everything within nature is our neighbor. To see the connection. And if we put spirituality aside and just speak from the point of view of what's beneficial for humanity, we see that everything is connected. Science, the deeper science goes into their discoveries, the deeper we understand that everything is connected with everything else, and everyone is connected with everyone else. So many examples could be. I said bee, the bees. If the bees are not healthy, what it can do to our economy, what can it do to our health, what can it do to the world if they're not pollinating? Everything is so symbiotic, a symbiotic lifestyle where we actually live with the recognition of how we are all connected, and everything has a purpose within creation. And we as human beings, individually and collectively, have the responsibility to either recognize this and live in harmony with it, or to neglect that truth and create inevitable pain, suffering, and destruction. So I want to serve. That is what I have dedicated my life to. I don't really have any possessions I own. I don't have bank accounts. I don't, as a Swami, my life is to connect with God's love within, and to be an instrument of that love by serving in my life. And that service is the most beautiful, wonderful gift, how we could make a difference for other people of all varieties. And in order to serve, in order to live with compassion, environmentalism with this spirit is inseparable.
Thank you, Maharaj, for really sharing with us the essence and the values that underpin the work of the Govardhan Eco Village. And your emphasis on service is, for those of us who have had the fortune of going to the Eco Village, we know that service is at the heart of the experience at Govardhan Eco Village, both for us as pilgrims, but also for the residents there. And I think one of the most fascinating things about the Govardhan Eco Village, tying into this value of seva, which I think many people don't know about, is really the groundbreaking work the residents and the volunteers do and the pilgrims do, serving the local villages and the local area. And that has implications not just in India, but globally as well, because we know that due to environmental issues, people who are economically disadvantaged suffer disproportionately. And so those of us who have more, who have the ability to help others, to serve others, it's a duty, it's a responsibility that we have. And so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the work that goes on, not at the Eco Village itself, but in the local surrounding villages to support those people.
Thank you. Govardhan Eco Village is a project which is a humble attempt to live with these principles as our foundation. In the villages of Maharashtra, where Govardhan Eco Village is located, it's about 100 miles from Mumbai. It's about 100 acres of land. There's so much suicide and poverty due to drought, due to depleted soil, and for various other reasons. To try to teach people things it's not easy, because people are habituated to how things have been done. And so we've discovered that if we can show them a positive alternative and they see that it works, then they'll believe in it. And unless people believe in it, they don't really put their heart into change. So Govardhan Eco Village, from an environmental perspective, is an experiment, which is a model. And we brought together a bridge of modern science and technology and their techniques, along with ancient wisdom and techniques. And we have PhD graduates from American and European universities serving hand in hand with simple villagers, really respecting the contribution of each other. And we developed the technologies, natural technologies for water harvesting, for transforming plastic into usable oil, a completely natural, beautiful form of sewage refinement, building bricks from our own soil with the minimum possible imprint on the environment, organic farming and pesticides to enrich the soils, and various ways of growing food. And by doing that, when we go to the villages and bring them to Govardhan Eco Village to see, they believe. And then they actually allow us to help them. And if we use the analogy of a wheel has spokes and a hub, and Govardhan Eco Village is like that hub. And we've adopted about 74 villages now, which are like the spokes of that wheel. And we go to those villages. We have our Bhaktivedanta hospital also. So we do sustainable health care and health education in the schools and to the adults. We have a wonderful program for women's empowerment to actually really psychologically, physically, and spiritually empower women to actually be happy, be united, and accomplish great things. And we've developed a lot of wonderful farming systems where water harvesting, natural irrigation, replenishing the topsoil. We've created schools and a vocational college to teach in that way. And in this way, spiritually, emotionally, physically, we're there for the villages to give a holistic perspective of life. And not only have in the villages that we're connected with, have the suicide rates gone to practically nil, which were very high before. But economically, families 30 to 50% more income, and they're actually living in a conscious awareness that living in harmony with respect for the environment is at the very heart of a spiritual, economic, and emotional future for their lives and their families. And also, because we're doing this, the United Nations has recognized us, and many universities from the Western world and India, and corporate headquarters have come to to have retreats there and actually apply these basic universal principles, to their own particular projects. We have many thousands and thousands of families that we're connected with, and they're not only appreciating, uplifted, but they're actively applying these principles in their lives.
It's really wonderful to hear, Maharaj, how you've taken this seed of an idea and manifested a beautiful eco-village, but crucially got local buy-in and support from the local community and helped them financially, spiritually, and emotionally. And it just shows how a holistic approach to addressing environmental issues is needed, that we can't just focus on one thing. And I want to take this conversation and see if we can take it globally, and talk a little bit about how we can talk a bit more about the values that underpin this work, because I've been, in the environmental field, a lot of people trace the historical roots to the ecological crisis to three key moments in history. People say that the three moments are primarily when humans first started cultivating the land, the arrival of Columbus to the Americas, and most recently, the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s. And these three moments are moments where we see that the values and the direction of humanity shifted in quite a significant and serious ways. And one thing that shifted at that time was looking at nature in a different way, to devaluing nature, to look at nature as a natural resource, as something for humans to use and exploit. And we can see over the last 100 years or so that there has been significant economic growth and development all across the world, has lifted millions out of poverty, has given people good health and good food, but at the cost of the damage to the natural world. And the pandemic really is an example of this, where we see that the unnatural mixing between humans and animals means that diseases spread. And this current pandemic is one of a number in recent years. We have SARS, we have MERS, Ebola, all of these viruses that come from the animal kingdom have a real threat to human life and human well-being. And so at the United Nations, we're talking about building back better. The World Economic Forum is talking about the Great Reset. So everybody's looking at, what do we do when we come out of the pandemic? How do we build back better? And I was hoping you could speak about, what are the values and the mindsets we need as we emerge out of the pandemic to ensure that we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past, to ensure that human civilization, whatever it's going to look like in the future, is one that is in harmony and in balance with the natural world. I was hoping you could speak a bit on that.
Interestingly, my guru, Srila Prabhupada, in the 1940s, he wrote articles about how if we exploit the resources of nature without replenishing, then there will be great crisis in the future. And that's what's happening. Consumption, everyone has to consume to some degree, but we have to balance our consumption in such a way that we focus on sustainable ways to replenish nature when we take the resources of nature. And if human beings focus on directing science and technology and industry in this way, then we will definitely not only discover, but realize that it's possible. It's natural. We don't have to consume and then pollute with the byproducts of our consumption, but rather we can consume in a responsible way with a direction in which we replenish, we nourish nature. This is a symbiotic lifestyle. It really needs to be a part of education. The idea of values in education is so critical in the world, and I'm really hoping and hopeful that after this pandemic we understand this need, that part of the education that we're giving to our children should be how we are all interconnected, all living beings along with nature, and how we need to have a responsible way. And science, technology, if it's directed in this direction, incredible, wonderful discoveries will be. It's for sure. It's not maybe, it's not if. It's just a matter of what we make our priorities. And of course, that begins with individuals. And each and every one of us to take it seriously, to apply the principle to our life to whatever extent is possible for us wherever we may live, and to interconnect with one another to create forums like this where we're helping to develop models and we're helping to develop awareness. Then there can be a great revival of this natural way of living. Simple living and high thinking. High thinking means we understand our connection. The idea of yoga or religion is the unity of the body, the mind, with the heart and with the soul. The unity of the soul with God, with all living beings, and with nature. And this value of symbiotic lifestyle, of understanding the need to live in harmony with nature and with each other is so important. If we're exploiting other human beings due to arrogance, in a certain way, we could understand that the same fundamental problem of racism is also there with animal rights and with nature. That arrogance that we are superior. I am superior. My race is superior. My religion is superior. My nation is superior. My sex is superior. In so many ways, my particular economic status is superior. We have this pathetic need due to a spiritual vacuum to feel ourselves superior to others, even in the name of spirituality. But actually, when we have a enriched inner experience of life, a connection with God, a connection with our own souls, a connection with truth within, then we understand how the joy of life is in being an instrument of compassion. The joy of life is in respecting the rights of others, seeing the brotherhood and sisterhood of all living beings. And that's just so important. We have this arrogance where we think we could just manipulate and exploit the resources of nature for my or our purposes, or to manipulate and exploit or disrespect other living beings with this idea that I have the right because I'm superior. this is at the heart of so much of the suffering. And it's due to this emptiness of true values within our own minds and within our own hearts. And hopefully with this pandemic and with all the other traumas that the world's going through, people will take a step back and reevaluate priorities. What is really important in life? What is valuable? Because what is good for the world is what's good for me. And what's good for me is what's good for the world.
I love that framing, that what's good for me is good for the world, and what's good for the world is good for me. In your journey within book, you talk about the concept of the gunas, of the modes of nature, and you explain how they impact everything in the world. And that's a framing from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains there are three energies in the world of sattva, rajas, and tamas, and of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And for a long time, I've thought that that is a beautiful framing for environmental activism, that our work needs to be in the quality of goodness, in that's wholesome and sustainable. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the gunas and how they can help us be environmental activists.
That is a very vast subject matter, Gopal, but I'll speak something. These three qualities of nature, which are like activating forces, are goodness, passion, and ignorance, or sattva, raja, and tama. Under the influence of time, the creation we live in is always changing. Nothing remains the same. And we're born, we grow. Throughout this growing in life and sustaining in life, on the cellular atomic level, everything's always changing at every moment. And we can see it on a slower pace of moment just by looking at our own bodies aging. But this is a world of change. And these three gunas are the impetus for this change. Sattva guna represents, let us say, Rajaguna represents creation. Sattva guna represents preservation. And Tamaguna represents the apparent change that comes with destruction or death. They're all inevitable. It's like a wheel that's always moving. They're all connected to each other. Now, in the way we live and in the way we develop our lifestyles, it is important that we harmonize creation with preservation. We harmonize Rajaguna with Sattvaguna. Because if we don't harmonize our enthusiasm to create with what is sustainable, with the principle of preservation, then automatically our creation will actually bring us to being influenced by destruction. And that's what's happened in our recent years. We've created without really balancing it with the idea of preservation. And therefore, our creation is actually causing mass destruction of resources and so forth. It's not difficult. It's actually very simple. The problem is we've already gone so far in this way of not recognizing the idea of preservation. We're just creating, leading to more and more problems of destruction and pollution and climate change and all of this. We just have to reorient ourselves and harmonize the idea, balance preservation with our creation, with our efforts to restore, to replenish, to be sustainable. And this is a law in which the material nature works under these three gunas, these three influences. And it's actually a beautiful art, a beautiful science to live within this world for whatever time we may have in such a way that we're living in harmony with our own souls, with our own hearts, and we're living with compassion.
Maharaj, when you speak, it makes it sound easy. But we know that in practice it can be difficult. So, but thank you for the encouragement to push us forward in living in sattva, balancing creation and preservation.
Actually, it is easy. It is simple, but the application is very complicated. But unless we believe in the truth of the simplicity of these truths, then we will not actually have the sense of need and enthusiasm to apply it to our lives. You know, the biggest trees are born of little seeds. We have to, you know, our accomplishments have to be built on the seed of what's actually a compassionate, sustainable lifestyle. I'm just thinking now, can you imagine that man creates the most incredible airplane? It's luxurious. It can go at supersonic speeds, but the airplane does not have a navigation system. It's flying 30,000 feet above sea level, and it's going at such a fast pace. If it doesn't have a compass, if it doesn't have a navigation system, even though it may be luxurious, and even more, though it may be very, very impressive from a technological perspective, and it may be very fast, and it may be everything, it's destined to destruction. It's lost. It needs a navigation system. So in certain ways, it's as simple as this. We're building our technologies and our industries and our lifestyles and our villages even. But if we don't have a proper navigation system, if we don't have a proper understanding of of how things work in nature and the direction we want to go, then our progress becomes a great destructive liability.
It's a beautiful point, Maharaj. And
it could be transformed into a great and powerful blessing.
I want to pick up on one point you mentioned. There's so many jewels that we could discuss for many hours. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury this evening. But there's one thing you mentioned which I want to pick up on, which is this point about enthusiasm, having enthusiasm and having hope for the future. And I want to bring that up in the context that, you know, we at the Sacred Ecology Forum, and I'm sure many of the other participants and the viewers on the conference this weekend, work with young people and older people as well. And we know that many people now experience what they call environmental trauma or environmental grief. And this is becoming an established field of study where we see people feeling depressed and concerned about the future of the planet and their lives in that future. And, you know, as Allegra mentioned earlier, we see almost daily news of wildfires and storms and flooding, and people really feel like there's a very bleak future ahead of themselves. And in addition to that, many young couples, and I know some, question if they want to have children and bring up children in the world today, knowing what we know about what's going to happen in the coming decades when it comes to the environmental crisis. And these young people are also very frustrated, angry with mainly an older generation who either dismiss what's happening or refuse to engage with the science or do not go far enough in enacting policies to address the crisis. And so there's a real pent-up feeling of anger and concern and frustration and sadness. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how do we find hope? How do we find that enthusiasm to push forward in this work? What can the practice and the framework of Eco Bhakti offer to those of us who want to do this work but feel that we can't because it's just an overwhelming concern for us?
I often share the example of a building that has a good foundation. It can withstand so many storms. And a building, however beautiful, elegant it may be, if it doesn't have a good foundation, when a storm comes, it crumbles. That's the way life is. We need an inner foundation because there are storms right now, storms that can make us very hopeless. There are storms that can make us feel very insecure and fearful and uncertain. But if we have a good foundation, then we understand and we are empowered to actually engage with this world in a way where we can make a positive difference. And for that, a spiritual practice is very important, to actually connect with the peace, with the love of God that's within our hearts. It's dormant within us. When we find peace within ourselves, when we find an inner strength of our own, reconnecting with our souls, with our true selves. This body is an ever-changing residence that we, the soul, is living in. And in order to really make a truly positive difference in the way we live, we need to be connected to our own true self, our own souls. And for that, a spiritual practice is very important. In our tradition, we chant God's names, there's prayers, there's meditation, to make that inner connection. The ecology outside of ourselves is very much a mirror reflection of the ecology that's within the hearts and the minds of mankind or humanity. And satsang is very important to choose to be with people who actually give us hope and give us faith and give us a meaningful active life to live. And that's what this Eco Bhakti Forum is for. And there are so many other types of forums in this way in the world where people are coming together to help to strengthen our inner foundation, to give ourselves hope and meaning and direction. Srila Prabhupada quoted from the fable that if you take many pieces of straw and bind them together, then you cannot break it. But if you take individual straws out, they're easily broken. So similarly, unity is strength. And when individuals, the strength is not just a mass. The strength is individual straws. And in this case, the strength is individuals, you and me, making the choice to be united for a purpose that we believe. And that really is beyond sectarian and arrogant exploitation, but it's actually for the real well-being of Mother Nature, of all living beings who are all God's creation, sacred creation. When we come together for this purpose, the more that connect, the more we have strength. And really, we shouldn't be hopeless. There's always infinite hope in every situation. Even in death, there's infinite hope if we understand the eternal nature of our true self. If we take shelter of that higher power of grace, then there's nothing that can impede us with hopelessness or despair. And that's very important, to make that connection, to have that foundation, and then to act. And this is not just an idea. This is a time-tested truth that has been the very basis of the lives of great people throughout history. So as far as having children, I don't have children because I'm a monk, but I have a lot of people that are not biologically children, but I'm trying to serve them like a parent. But really, if we have something beautiful, something that's universally beneficial, spiritually, emotionally, then we have a very good reason to have children. If we really try to live in harmony with this idea, and to have children to raise with these ideals, then our children can have a very meaningful, wonderful purpose in life. There was a great poet and saint named Thakur Bhaktivinoda, and he gave us a glimpse through a particular phrase he wrote of how we can be inspired by challenging situations. He wrote that where there's the greatest necessity, there's the greatest opportunity to serve. And we find throughout history, whether it's religious history or whether it's political history or history in any way, where we recognize the greatness of a person, it's so often because they had to face difficult challenges. Srila Prabhupada wrote, the greatness of a person is how we respond to difficult situations. So this is a very difficult situation. And because it's so difficult and because it's so apparently insurmountable, it takes serious commitment to positive change. And we could all individually and collectively participate in this incredible adventure.
And I want to, if I can, and this will be my last question, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So please have those questions coming into Vineet. Maharaj, I'm wondering if you could speak to, I think a lot of people are drawing parallels between, at least here in the United States, between our current moment and when you were a teenager in the 1960s and 70s. We know back then there was issues around civil rights and the Vietnam War, and there was a mass uprising mainly led by young people who wanted a revolution. And there are very strong parallels today with Black Lives Matter, the climate crisis, and so many other concerns going on in the United States. And I'm wondering if you could speak to those parallels, and critically, what's the role of someone who's practicing spirituality in this moment? Because I think many of us find that an argument is often put forward that to be spiritual means to not engage with the world and to not engage with these concerns and to retreat to the Himalayas or to a cave or to the ashram or the forests. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to the parallels and how a spiritual person is called to make that positive change, that positive impact, which you were just talking about.
Yes, the 1960s was a time of great turbulence in the United States of America. As you said, there was Vietnam War, which really didn't make sense to so many of the young generation who were being forced to go there and kill or be killed for something they didn't believe in at all. And then there was the civil rights. And this movement at that time, people of minority colors, they were African Americans, in Native American Indians, it was just so cruel how they were being forced into poverty and they weren't really given a chance. And there are brothers and sisters, and the very idea of the United States of America is freedom and liberty for all. All people are created equal. That's the very principle. And it's Krishna tells in Gita, Suradam Sarvabhutanam, that a person who's actually connected to God becomes a true friend for all living beings. In fact, Srila Prabhupada, my teacher, at one time he spoke these words. He said, the purpose of the Krishna consciousness or God consciousness movement is to feel for the sufferings of others. Karuna, compassion, is the basic principle. By living a life with compassion, which means in harmony, with respect, with gratitude, that is an inseparable way to awaken our self-realization, our love for God. And simultaneously, to the degree we develop that love, we naturally live as an instrument of that love in compassion for others. So there's a great need. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a great need. And we find, throughout history, this need is there to live in a spirit of gratitude and respect rather than arrogance and greed. And disrespect.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. I'm going to now open the floor for some questions, and please keep them coming in. We still have 25 minutes for some questions. I want to start with a question that's just come in, and sorry, I don't have the names here. Someone's asking that oftentimes when we try to do something good, we unintentionally do something bad. So for example, we may feel like we want to fly to India to help some people in need, but not knowingly we are causing carbon emissions by doing that, which causes, and contributes to climate change. Or that we want to produce an eco-conscious business, but recognize that there are fossil fuels needed to run that business, from transportation of products and so on. So how do we reconcile that? Maybe not in a practical way, but more in a philosophical way, that trying to do something good we know may cause some harm, unintentional harm. How do we reconcile that within ourselves?
As we spoke previous, we need to have foundational values in our life, and they become the basis in which we make our decisions. In the world we live, it's very difficult for most of us to not be connected to various technologies that pollute the environment. But there's an analogy that's given that if you have a thorn in your foot, sometimes you can take another thorn to take that thorn out. But if we don't know how to do it, then we may end up with two thorns in our feet. So it's important that we understand what direction we want to go. So we balance. If we're taking an airplane to India, as you have given as an example, for the purpose of invigorating, enlightening our own hearts to be a better citizen of the world, to be a better servant of God and humanity, then the price of going could actually be very much small compared to the benefits of what we could do as a human being for the world. So it's important to balance, to have a right purpose, and to not exploit that idea.
Thank you. I have another question.
But to very carefully, thoughtfully engage in the world in such a way that our values are being served.
Thank you. We have another question here from a college student. The question is, so many animals, and especially cows, are being slaughtered all over the world, and there's a huge financial incentive supporting that systematic suppression and exploitation of animals. So what can we do, whether we're college students or working professionals, what can we do to make a difference?
It is a type of arrogance to be selective of who we take care of and who we don't. If a person has a dog, because they have a personal relationship with that dog or cat, the dog or cat is like a family member. And if the dog or cat is in pain, the family will do anything to alleviate the pain. They feel for the pain. Cows and other animals that are being slaughtered in mass every day, they feel, they love their life. They seek pleasure just like our dogs and cats. But because we selectively do not have a personal connection with them, we ignore it. And actual compassion is being inclusive. That these animals are life-loving. They fear like we do. They feel pain like we do. They cherish their life like we do. They may not have the intellectual capacity that we do, but their lives are sacred. And it's to apply that principle to our own life and to expand that principle among each other, not just through condemning, people who don't really understand that, because people are so habituated to another way of life. People are so accustomed for generation after generation of not opening their heart to understand the sufferings that meat eating is causing to life-loving people. And what to speak of the ecological problems it creates too. But we need to understand that even those people who are doing that, they're victims of certain habits, and we need to enlighten people. And it begins by changing ourselves, by living in harmony of the sacred values that we believe in, and then trying to enlighten others by our example and by our collective efforts of education. Education is important. To educate people in these fundamental values of compassion.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have another question here. Earlier, you spoke about how your spiritual teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, mentioned that to be a Krishna conscious or a God conscious person means to feel the suffering of others. And this question is asking, how do we balance that? How do we balance the feeling suffering for others and the need to know our own limitations and practice self-care?
From a spiritual perspective, to feel the sufferings of others simultaneously makes us very sad, but also awakens a happiness. A sadness, paradukha dukhi, for the sufferings that others are enduring, and a happiness because we can do something according to our capacity to help and to serve. To the degree we become connected with God's grace within our own hearts, God we call Krishna, then we become instruments of that compassion. And being an instrument of that compassion, trying our best, is the greatest joy of life. Simultaneously suffering and enjoying is something that is a beautiful mystery. You see, we are conditioned to evaluate things quantitatively. And what is important is we have to learn to balance it by evaluating things qualitatively. If we're trying our best with sincerity to make a positive difference, then that quality is completely full and rich and complete. Whether it's quantitatively large or small doesn't really make that much difference. The analogy of a little spider helping to build a bridge across the Indian Ocean while Hanuman was carrying mountains to build the same bridge. The little spider could only move one grain of sand at a time. So quantitatively, there was an enormous difference. But Lord Ram, he told both the spider and Hanuman, you are both doing equal. You're both trying your best. So let us appreciate the opportunity to try our best. Not become hopeless, not to become discouraged or depressed. Let us just try our best. And that's a beautiful life. And if there's enough people who are doing that, somebody may contribute to a cause a penny, but that's all they have. And others may $1 billion because that's all they have. It's the same. Srila Prabhupada wrote that Krishna or God doesn't see what we do, but sees the intent and the sincerity in which we do it. And it's that intent and sincerity and that makes activism meaningful. And when activism is built on the foundation of that sincerity of intent, then we can change the world in a wonderful way. And the time is now, opening so many doors to giving a sense that we could make a difference.
We have a personal question that's come in, Maharaj, and I hope you're okay with answering personal questions. Somebody is asking, where in nature do you go to find joy and inspiration? Because many people go to the beach or to the forest or like to go to be with cows. So someone's asking where you personally like to go in order to feel connected with the earth.
The beaches and the forests and the cows. Ultimately, I like to go within myself. Every morning I chant japa, I chant God's names and meditate on the natural ecology of God's love within myself. And when I make that connection, then whether I'm in the beaches and the forests or with the cows, or even if I'm in New York City, it's beautiful. It's beautiful because the world is very much a mirror reflection of the state of our consciousness.
Thank you. Another question that's come in, someone's asking that they are saying that, you know, you've been an environmental activist and leader for many years, and you're also a religious leader, and you have followers in many parts of the world, and you've been a monk in the renounced order of the Krishna Bhakti tradition for many, many years. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in terms of how to help and encourage people in whatever path of life they're pursuing?
to strive sincerely, with humility, with gratitude, to be an example, and together to create model examples.
Thank you very much. So just one final question now before we close out for the day. And there are so many good questions coming in. I don't know which one to start. Let's end with this one. It's the last question that just came in. The question is, could it be an act of bhakti to step back and not engage? What about self-care and going within, or taking a step back from activism when it becomes too emotionally or mentally overwhelming? There is a lot of activism burnout right now, and sometimes it seems like we could do more for others if we learned to take better care of ourselves.
In your question is embedded a perfect answer. That balance is crucial. Just like if we're trying to accomplish things, we need to eat and we need to sleep in order to have the strength to perform our duties in a sustainable way. If we work and work and work thinking I don't have time, the more I work, the more I'll achieve, and we don't have time to sleep and we don't give time to eating properly, then it's just a matter of time till we burn out. So we need a balanced life. Balance in the sense of we have to take care of our physical health through proper nourishment, through proper sleep, through proper exercise. We need to balance that with emotional health by being with good people, by taking the time to be in invigorating places, people, to read proper books, whatever. And we need to balance that with our spiritual health, through our sadhana, through our spiritual practice. Through our spiritual practice and through satsang, or association with enlightening people, it's like we're charging a cell phone. If we use our cell phone, but if we don't take the time to charge it, then it's going to burn out. So we need to take time to balance our spiritual needs, our emotional needs, and our physical needs, along with a balance to our responsibilities, to our service to humanity and to society and to the world. So environmental activism, animal rights activism, humanitarian activism, spiritual activism, it takes courage. It takes inner strength to do it in a sustainable way. And for that, we need to balance our duties, our families, give proper attention and care to our families, our physical health, our emotional health, and our spiritual well-being. And if we balance our life accordingly, that's what the Bhagavad Gita calls the mode of goodness. Then what we do is sustainable and will actually be effective. So we shouldn't be discouraged. From a completely external material perspective, there's every reason to be discouraged. Ultimately, everybody and everything has to die, so there's a lot of discouragement. But when we make a spiritual connection, when we invest and nourish our spiritual potential, then we understand the beauty that life can bring us. To be instruments of God's grace, it's beautiful.
Thank you very much, Radhanath Swami Maharaj. Unfortunately, we are out of time now, and I know there are many more questions, and I'm sure we can go for many more hours, but we do have to draw the conversation to a close here. Thank you, Maharaj, for your time and for really expanding and elaborating on what this concept of eco bhakti is and how we can all find our own contribution in this moment of crisis, but also a moment of transformation and opportunity and growth. So thank you so much, so very, very much. I'd like to hand back over now to Vineet Chanda for the final announcements.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gopal. And of course, thank you, Radhanath Swami. I'm so struck by how moving and eloquent and yet practical this exploration of eco bhakti has been. And just to echo, Gopal, your excellent framing, drawing from what Radhanath Swami wrote in The Journey Within, this idea of eco bhakti being an approach that is active and dynamic, that is intelligent and thoughtful, based on principles and values, and that is ultimately rooted so deeply in the heart space, rooted so deeply in this call to be instruments of care and compassion. And I think that came out so beautifully in the conversation. So we're so indebted to you. In many ways, tonight's conversation served as a keynote to frame and define for us this concept of eco bhakti that we'll continue to explore. I'm so excited about tomorrow's exploration. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will gather for a deep dive into spiritual responses to ecological crisis, climate crisis, with a wonderful teacher and author and activist, Ranchor Prime, who is also has a very deep bhakti practice, who has served as an educator and a consultant, and who has authored, among other texts, a translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and also a text called Hinduism and Ecology, which really is a kind of a groundbreaking seminal work. So we're so honored to have Ranchor with us, and that will be tomorrow at 11 a.m. If you haven't already done so, I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and sign up for that. And there's a little bit of a different process. There's a link to an Eventbrite. So perhaps someone can put that in the chat box for those who need it. But that is for Ranchor Prime's session tomorrow at 11. And then on Sunday, we're switching gears in one sense. We're turning more towards the arts and the intersection of poetry, of music, and of sacred sound with this idea of eco bhakti. And we're so delighted and excited to have Johnny Harrison, who is an incredible devotional musician and artist, a world music artist, Grammy nominated, and also a BBC radio presenter, who will be taking us on a very innovative journey through the realms of poetry and nature, and finding the poetry in nature, drawing from nature to evoke poetry. So it's something you really don't want to miss. And that is on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, actually at this the same URL, the same link that we joined for tonight's session. So with that, I wish to again extend my gratitude to the whole team who put this together, to Allegra for her wonderful job in offering those introductory remarks, to my dear friends, Gaura Kumar and Christopher Fici, who are helping in so many ways behind the scenes on the tech side, and a very, very special deep thanks from the core of our hearts to our wonderful speakers this evening, Gopal Patel and Radhanath Swami Maharaj. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful night, and we hope to see you tomorrow and on Sunday.